Hello and welcome back to the Sardonic Podcast. This will be the first video in a series of specials where we'll be covering E3 press conferences. These will be a little less organized and a little less official and probably won't be the full length of a normal episode, but I do intend to at least find some people to help me react and talk to some of these press conferences that are coming up. And the first press conference of interest that came up is EA. I think everybody knows that EA is kind of the dark horse in the room, the elephant no one wants to talk about, that uncle you invite that you know touched a child back in 5th grade. That's about how I reckon EA. Well, despite what you might think about EA, they do put on at least a pretty damn good show. Their press conference, at least from my first perspective, was, cringy as an E3 conference generally tends to look, but professional, and they kind of did water their stuff pretty well. But my guest today, joining me for this particular episode of the coverage, is Mr. Drew Cheswick Smith. You might remember him from one of our previous episodes, and he's here to talk about EA and what they've brought to the forefront. A word of
What's
warning
up?
before we start. I'm not a sports guy. I'm not into FIFA or Madden or any of the other sports titles. I don't think I could give good coverage of that, so those won't be here. If you're looking for coverage on those items, I would recommend looking somewhere else. But with that out of the way, let's start off with the first thing that they wanted to show off, and that was Battlefield 5. So, Drew, I guess I'll ask you first, just what was your just initial reaction to the entire conference as a whole?
Well, first of all, with the name, I like how after Battlefield 1 is Battlefield 5. I understand why they did it. It's just kind of funny. They're really good at counting there at EA. But seriously, it looks awesome. I like shooters. They're not my favorites, but after a day of work, you go home, you want to unwind. You're probably not going to play that JRPG that you have on the shelf. You're going to do some mindless shooting, and this one just looks awesome. Um, the graphics are beautiful so far, it looks like.
I have to agree with you. I do have a soft spot for the Battlefield series and the Battlefield games. I haven't actually played one for a long time. That's a guilty pleasure. If I sound a little quiet, it's because I'm recording this late at night and I don't want to wake anybody else in this area up. Um, but one of the things that they were talking about, some of the features and things, was a lot of cosmetics, customization of your character. And I guess I'll start there just because this is EA we're talking about. This is money and things that they love to really gouge people for. What is your opinion, at least at the forefront of them putting this kind of cosmetic thing right in the some of the opening advertisements here?
Well, I first of all have to say there are multiple games for the EA block where they have announced that there is purchasable customization of your character. And honestly, I don't have too much of an issue with it as long as there are a few things that they follow. Number one, loot boxes are atrocious. Um, I understand having them in there, but at the same time, you need to also have the option of buying whatever the hell you want. Because it's stupid to have that 1% chance, which does mean it can never drop for you. You could drop $1,000, as both of us know from playing League of Legends and trying those boxes. Uh, there's a good chance that you won't get what you want. So as long as you can purchase what you want, that's a decent check, at least for me. It means that if I want something bad enough, I'll buy it. Number two, it cannot have any benefits to the game, which luckily for this, there won't, unless it makes your model a pixel or two smaller. It won't. Um, so I don't really mind the ability to purchase customizations for your character. I think that that really does go to help make that character feel more you. And I think that that really does help you enjoy playing that game more.
I'm gonna agree with you on that one. I just wanted to get the microtransaction bit out of the way because EA is kind of famous for this microtransaction-y bullshit. So
I
now that's
actually
out of the
have a
way, look,
comment on that later, though.
I will do that later. So one of the other things I was like looking at when I saw Battlefield 5 is they have really put this emphasis on movement. Like it seems like there's a lot of like the environment now plays a much bigger role in the idea of movement, and I think that that's a very good direction for Battlefield. I think that there's only so much you can kind of do with the concept of innovating and changing guns. Guns are always going to be kind of a binary experience of point and shoot and point and shoot. But I do think that you can really impact a game by impacting method of movement, and obviously the environment being destructible looks very interesting. I want to see how that pans out to maybe larger scale environments because they did only showcase what looked to be uh, a kind of small snow village type map.
I agree. I mean, Battlefield's always been really good about their destructible environments. They're the ones who came up with Bad Company, and that was the first group of games that I can even remember where you could see a house and you could just say, I don't feel like having that house there anymore. So you chuck a grenade in it and watch it tumble to the ground. But even as far as just movement goes, you're right. It looks like they've done amazing with just adding your options. It shows at one point someone running and doing a dive and firing, but it's not like the old Call of Duty type of dolphin dive looking thing where you just go into a prone position and you're firing from a prone position, kind of normal.
Yeah, he
This is
really
more
did kind
like,
of like anime out that window in the shots that I was seeing.
yeah, they like did a leg first slide when they're firing over their kind of chest, and I think that that's once again going to really get into the immersion for the game. I mean, you go for Battlefield for the more realistic everything. You go for Call of Duty for the haha, I'm gonna run around and shoot everyone or throw a knife at everyone for the next 10, 15 minutes, whatever. Um, and the fact that they've really kind of added these extra little ways of moving and destroying your environment and everything that really do add that immersion into the gameplay is that's going to really be their benefit, instead of just the very traditional stock movement of any shooter that Battlefield has always had.
That's true, and that's something that is actually very important to point out. Is that the reason that I think that this is a very important thing, something that I think is going to be looked past as far as a lot of this kind of discussion about Battlefield is that the corridor shooter, which is what a lot of people have been calling kind of a derogatory term for the first person shooter for a long time, of just like hallway shoot, crouch, duck, move, cover. That's a very kind of explained and already done style of first person shooter. By expanding movement, you expand the ways that you can play the game in a way that adding more guns just can't do. We're going to talk more about movement in the game later because there's talk of Anthem that has to come up. But I think that we've hit a lot of the core ideas for Battlefield 5. Is there anything else that you had kind of had that you want to talk about?
Not really. I really hope that they have a solid story mode. While I love the just multiplayer aspect of a lot of these games, first thing I do when I get one is I play that story mode. And so if they don't make that solid, I think that that's really losing out on a core feature of the game. So that's one thing I'm really hoping they strengthen. Call of Duty 1 had a great story. It was just short. And I did like the fact there were I believe, 5 different stories. But like I said, they were short. If you wanted to play the whole game, you could do it in an afternoon. So as long as they keep the story strong, I think that they'll have a strong contender with Battlefield 5.
All right, and I think on to the next topic. The next one that looked interesting to me was Unraveled 2. I did not play Unraveled 1. So I'll just put that out
Neither
there.
did I, unfortunately.
But this does kind of look like it's in the vein of the kind of like A Way Out stories that were being made by EA's originals studios. And
I was, yeah, I saw that it definitely has that same kind of co-op to get from point A to point B kind of thing. The one thing I do have to say though is I do hope that they keep the same monetary idea that A Way Out had.
that's true. And I think that for Unravel will be fine. I think
If
EA
they don't,
has. Well, I mean, it's EA. You can. There's a lot of derogatory things we can say right now, but I think for the benefit of the doubt, we'll just they A Way Out worked. I think they'll try to emulate that model at least a couple more times. Um, I mean, there's not a lot to say. It looks very cartoony. It looks very fun. Like it looked like a really good game to maybe like if a parent wanted to play with their kid or maybe two friends wanted to play it. I'm not sure what the long time shelf value of a game like that really is, but I mean, for the if it was released and I had a friend to play it with, I'd absolutely look into getting Unraveled too. From what I saw, but as far as it is, there's not a lot for me to say about it. Is there anything you had to say about it?
honestly, I'm kind of looking forward to playing it with my wife. She does play a couple of games, and I think that that would just be a fun thing to play with her. Once again, it's just kind of a relaxing game because the puzzles I can almost guarantee are not going to be that complex with that style of game. Um, but another place I can actually see it really shining is in the speedrunning community. Um, Playing it so that one person's playing both characters or however it may be. That's going to be one of those games where optimization is going to be kind of important for that, and I can see that one really taking off in that community.
The co-op speedrun. I also think it might make a pretty good Let's Play community game. Um, I think for maybe the single player enthusiast, it might be a little out, but I don't have anything bad to say about it. It does look like it's a completely acceptable game. The next one actually that I want to talk about, they didn't have a lot to showcase, but what I did see, I was very interested in, was Sea of Solitude. I got a real Wind
Yeah.
Waker vibe from it. And I say this as a guy who's not usually a fan of Legend of Zelda, but I did like Wind Waker.
I kind of got a similar vibe, except that mixed almost with like a one of these more episodic Life is Strange kind of games where your choices are kind of going to affect it, like all the little things. And
I actually kind of got a Shadow of the Colossus vibe from it. Like,
yeah, I was kind of confused about that. Did you play as the person who was transforming into this beast, or
I think
as
that you
another
are.
person?
I like to believe that you
Because,
are.
and I'm hoping you are, but there were these other scenes where it seemed like there was another person who was encountering this beast of a person kind of thing.
That's true. And obviously, we don't have a whole lot of information to work off of, just to kind of showcase there. But I really did like what I see, or liked what I saw. That's more correct. From what I saw on it, there's not a whole lot to say, and I wish there was more to say because it looked like a very interesting game. And unfortunately, it wasn't helped by the fact that the woman who was hosting that particular part of the seminar's grasp of English was not the finest tuned. I don't want to
She
sound.
she did have a bit of a thick accent,
Yeah.
and this is coming from someone whose in-laws have that thick accent.
Yeah, it was a little hard to catch the information as it was coming up, but based on what I saw and what I heard, it looked very interesting. I definitely want to investigate that as more information is made available to me. But now let's talk up to the two big workhorses for EA here, which are not sports games. And I guess we'll start with the black sheep, Star Wars Battlefront 2, and its expanded content. So here's a little disclaimer from me. I did not purchase Star Wars Battlefront 2 not because it was a bad game, but because I morally could not support EA in their monetization schemes for Star Wars Battlefront 2. I've heard it's gotten better, and I do think I will pick it up once So specifically Obi-Wan Kenobi comes out because he's like my favorite character. But I have heard it's gotten better. So based off of that, I just want to talk about some of the new content that they were talking about. So as I'll start with you, Drew. Is there anything they kind of showcased for Star Wars Battlefront 2 that you're a little interested in?
Um, as a fan of the Empire, I'm really excited to kill some Ewoks.
I believe that feature is
I
actually already in.
oh then I plan on re-buying the game. I have had it in the past, but it just felt like such a lackluster game at the time. And keep in mind, this was during the loot boxes and all of that.
The scandalous fiasco of its release.
Yeah, so I think it was kind of towards the end, so the price, because everyone was so pissed at this game, like the price had gone down to like $20, so it's like, yeah, I'll try it. And it just felt like such a lackluster game. I mean, a game where they add space type combat and the ships even feel like they're kind of meh.
Which is a shame
That
too, because
just
I
kind
thought
of
space combat in the original Battlefront 2 was probably like my favorite part of that game. I
the
loved the OG.
2000 version.
Yeah, like that was like
Oh,
my favorite part of that game.
it was tons of fun. I mean, even the fact that you had to take your character and physically run to the ship that you wanted to be in was awesome. It meant that, okay, well, I instead of just choosing from a little list, oh, I want to be this ship this time, you actually got to choose. And it also meant that there was kind of a nice little balance in the field of what was out there.
Yeah, that was really cool. But let's talk about what they showcased because I believe their big announcement was that they were adding in Clone Wars elements into Star Wars Battlefront 2. With the big boys being Grievous, Dooku, Obi-Wan, and Anakin being added in.
Now, one thing I was slightly confused about that. Were they talking more about the movie Clone Wars, or were they talking actually about the series?
Probably the movies. That at least I think that's visually where it will be inspired from.
Right,
Um,
visually, and I understand that. But, I mean, if they went off of the cartoons a little bit, that could also add in a lot of cool flair.
yeah, and I agree with that. I think there's going to be a lot of cool places. I hope we get to see Magito. That'd be a really cool Battlefront. And
Uh,
I think
The
the big
maps
ones I
were
want to
definitely
see.
cool for that
Yeah,
era.
I think that if they do add in a bunch of Clone Wars content, the things I want to see are um, maybe a Camino map, a what's it called map, a Maigito, and probably Kashyyyk. Those three are probably the three that I'm the most interested in them adding in. Um, but if
I
they,
also think that that would offer a lot of different variety too.
I agree,
Um,
and I think that that's really what I think Battlefront 2 needs. I think that it has a great core gameplay experience. If the progression system is actually in a better place than it was at launch and release, and it has more content to offer, I think that it is a perfectly fine game, and I would definitely think about getting it.
as long as not everything is behind a paywall.
Yeah, that's I. I don't want to pay for the game 5 times to get everything, but I would be willing to pay for each expansion DLC. So I'm not gonna complain too much about that. Companies got to make
Oh,
money so they can keep
DLC
supporting a
is
game.
DLC is understandable. I mean, uh, if a video game company decides they want to keep making content, then I fully understand having to pay for it. It's when it's the little stuff that you have to pay for, like specific characters on top, or instead of just a full package.
And I would agree with you right there. So, um, I guess the last thing we really need to talk about is the real workhorse, the real showcase for EA's E3 exposition, which was Anthem. I'm beginning to think that me and you have very different opinions on Anthem. um,
I believe so.
so I think let's just lay it out right now. What's your opinion on Anthem? Just Are you looking forward to it or not?
It's Destiny with Iron Man suits. Destiny
Um,
kind of lost me with it recently, so
and
I'm not looking forward to it.
so I am looking forward to it. Because at first I thought the same thing. I thought this looks like Destiny with Iron Man suits. Then I thought about it a little bit more. I actually looked into the subtler mechanics of it, and I realized they did something that Destiny did not do. It looks like they have really incorporated movement as a core feature of the game, and that's my biggest gripe with Destiny. Destiny feels like an MMO style Halo game, and I think that's not an unfair criticism to make against Destiny. It feels floaty the way Halo feels floaty, and its guns react in a similar way to Halo. So it's
Well, it's the same company.
exactly. I'm not like I said. It worked for Halo, but it doesn't feel like it works for Destiny. However, Anthem looks like it has really thought about how it wants to move characters on the map. You have things like swimming through the water, things like flying through the air, and it looks like you can utilize these things in combat to really kind of change the way you play the game, depending on how you want to play. Because, like we said earlier with Battlefield, movement is a bigger factor in a shooting game than the guns are. But it looks like you have a variety of guns and tactics and a variety of motion and movement. So I think that this game has a better grasp on how to make a good game than Destiny does at its core. It looks like it has better core gameplay, and that's just what I've seen. But that's my
I
opinion,
have
and I want to hear yours.
I have one more gripe with it, other than the fact where it is, in my opinion, still a Destiny clone, just with jump jets and whatnot. Uh, it's in third person. And to me, especially when it comes to shooters, I am not a fan of third person. And that's a me thing. That doesn't mean that a game is bad. But
That's
that
actually
is
interesting too
something that,
because I have the opposite feeling. I prefer third person in shooting games because the field of view is larger.
and that's my gripe actually, that it is larger. You can see more of what's going on instead of having to more realistically rely on what you can see and moving your head and that sort of thing.
Yeah, but
So,
I think that first person is fine in like a multiplayer player versus player environment. What I've found is that if you're playing against AIs, and obviously I think just looking at it, this looks like a game where there will be a lot of like Zerg Rush style storms or swarms. I think that the third person is better for like being able to react to back attacks faster. Um,
and for this game specifically, I do have to say that third person was the better choice. When you've got that increased mobility from your jetpack, from swimming, whatever, you need to be able to tell where you are in relation to the ground, in relation to all these other things around you that first person just doesn't allow you to have. And in the real world, we would kind of have that peripheral sense to see where we are. So in this game, third person is really the only way they could go. It's just, it can be a turnoff for me.
mm, I will say this. Looking at Anthem, because like I said, my gut initial reaction to it was this is Destiny in third person with Iron Man suits. However, like I said, you really do define a game of specifically a first person shooter with the freedom of movement, and I think that if Anthem can deliver on a game with really liberal movement, it will be an exponentially better game than I think Destiny has the capacity to be in its current state. I'm not a
I
huge fan of Destiny either, just to be completely clear here. um, if you couldn't tell, my stance on monetization models and things should tell you what I think about Destiny 2. But I think just based off the footage I saw, I mean, there's obviously I haven't played the game, I haven't felt it. If movement feels too restrictive and it can't be used as well in combat, then I don't necessarily think it'll be that much better than Destiny. But I mean, I think the pieces are there for a very solid gameplay experience, and I think that has a lot of potential to be incredibly good here.
And I completely agree. And luckily, they still have a year or about that uh, to put the finishing touches on everything and get things battened down exactly how they want. They have announced its release date already, and it is in 2019. And I do think that honestly, this game is going to have a huge following, assuming that
Well, it's a BioWare
it,
game. People worship the
well,
ground BioWare walks on.
well, yeah, but assuming that the game does stick with how it's looking now.
I think that's
And one thing we haven't touched on, the fact that there are no classes in this game.
that's true. You're not locked into a class. They did talk about how the suits act as kind of like pseudo classes, but you can swap between suits depending on your mission and what you want to do, or even just how you want to play. And I think that is a very big attraction for a lot of people. Customization of playstyle to the situation is really kind of tantamount.
And with the amount of customization that they've said you have for your javelin is, I believe, what they're calling it.
Yeah, the
Um,
javelin.
it sounds like it's going to be a huge amount of uh, customization and whatnot, because they said even the geometry you can change on these things. So it's not just, oh, I like this item more than this item, so I'm going to equip that. It's going to be a lot more of making it your own. And that is one thing I can absolutely get behind.
I do like the idea of the highly customizable javelin suit, just because I think that it plays into the fantasy of it really well. You described them earlier like Iron Man suits, and I think that the coolest aspect of owning your own Iron Man suit would be able to like customize it. Like that would be the cooler part.
Make the
um,
whole thing glow in RGB LEDs.
I apologize about the coughing, by the way. I've I've a bit of a sore throat because I've been kind of rapid fire recording some of these. Um, I think that since Anthem is a really big workhorse, they really wanted to showcase some good stuff for it, and I would love to get my hands on a copy or like a demo copy of it and play it. Just because of what I've seen, it looks really good, and I'm definitely gonna have my eyes out on this one. Because as bad as EA is, as bad as like the stigma that they kind of carry with them can be, I want to have faith that the developers who make these games are still going to make good games. And I know BioWare has a track record of good games, even if Mass Effect Andromeda was a bit of a flop. But that's what I have faith that BioWare is a good enough development studio that can make a game that's ambitious like this and give it some good core gameplay. But I think that's everything we have for the EA conference. Chiswick, is there anything you would like to add before we go on this one?
Um, I think that EA made a great statement for this whole one, kind of with their direction of the future with the games that they're releasing. I do think, though, that it is a sad world we live in when as soon as they say no loot boxes, everyone claps. The fact that we have to be excited for that is a little sad, and that is something that is the beast that they made. Um, they're they are the ones who took advantage of that more than others. And with their recent release of A Way Out and what looks like Unravel 2, whether or not you have to buy that second copy of the game, um, I think that's going to be awesome. And I think that they're doing a great job on trying to make amends for what they've done in the past.
Well, thank you for being on this special coverage episode of E3. We will be back again tomorrow, maybe with a new guest, maybe with Cheswick if he's still here. Um, covering what are tomorrow's conferences, actually. Now that I'm looking at it, I don't have my schedule up. Anyways, we will be back tomorrow with coverage of the Microsoft panel as well as coverage of the Bethesda panel. And we'll watch the Devolver one, and if it is interesting, we'll probably make some coverage for that. I don't know if it'll get its own episode, though. But we will talk to you again tomorrow.